everybody, and welcome to ConTinual. I'm Jeanne Adams, your host, and tonight we have the most wonderful interview with the ever awesome Seressia Glass. How are you doing tonight?
Doing pretty good. I'm having a good Monday.
Excellent. Great to have you with us. You have been incredibly prolific. You have been writing for 20 plus years. You've been published for 20 plus years. And you have some fabulous books that I absolutely adore. So I'm so excited that you were willing to come on and chat with me tonight about your time in publishing, your process, all that great stuff. So you got started with contemporaries, right?
Yes, contemporary romance is what I started with. Way back in 2000 is when my first book came out. It was no commitment required, steamy, angsty, over the top, love story. So.
And there were 5 or 6 in that, 6, I guess, in that contemporary world. Now I know you're going to reissue those, but there were 6 of those contemporaries.
Yeah, so all interconnected. My first 4 books were No Commitment Required, No Apologies, 3 Wishes, and Through the Fire. And then there is a novella that I'm looking to expand and put back out once I re-release all of those.
Mm-hmm. That's going to be so much fun. So what got you started writing? I mean, obviously contemporary romance, awesome. What got you started in writing? What got you started in romance? How'd you get you started?
Oh, how did I? Well, I started because I was a reader. I read everything, comics, cereal boxes, anything I could get my hands on, everything in the library. But I didn't really think about could I write it until I started reading some science fiction and fantasy, Madeleine L'Engle, Ursula K. Le Guin, those stories with strong women. And I just wanted to write heroines that were like that just took on these larger than life roles and responsibilities and against all odds and just kind of, triumphed over everything. And so I just kind of glommed all of that as much as I could growing up. Then how did I stumble onto romance? I have no, how did I do that? Just going through the bookstore and, I started in the science fiction section. So Octavia Butler, just kind of went through that alphabetically. And then I finally got around to the romance section. And I think it was, somebody gave me a historical, because I would say that my mom had some. She probably did have a couple of those old Harlequins from way, way back in the day that
the sweet ones,
never, right? So I probably stole one of those, because didn't everybody steal one of their mother's Harlequins? But yeah, I just kind of read around the bookstore. So I started with historical first, because I didn't know contemporary romances were a thing. So I started with historical romances, because that was kind of fantasy adjacent enough.
Right. No, I get it. I totally do. Yeah.
So that kind of made sense. And then, so I made up my own stories. I did this, did a haunted PTA, haunted play for the PTA one Halloween. Then I did for extra credit in English, I did an autobiography of a piece of bubble gum. I don't know. That's what my brain was as a teenager. Yeah. It's things that'll never see the light of day, the autobiography of the bubblegum.
Yeah, we have a number of discussions anytime I do one of these about the books that will stay under the bed.
Yes.
For those of us who started in the 2000s, where we were still like boxing up manuscripts to send when we got a request for a full and all of that sort of thing, and the ones that you would come back stamped no thank you, and you just go under the bed and go, all right, next one.
Right, break out the next. So yeah, and then I was working part-time in a bookstore, supporting my book buying habit. And a group of writers were having a book signing, and they were the Georgia romance writers. And I'm like, oh my God, they're real people. Oh my God, they actually live in my state. Oh my God, they're right down the street. You have meetings? Okay, I can come? Sure, I'll be right there. So 1997, I joined them and kind of dusted off my okay, here's a little tidbit that nobody knows. No Commitment Required actually started off as Duran Duran fan fiction before I knew what fan fiction was.
That's so awesome.
Self-inserted. I was part of a band. We were part of a female band, and we were on tour with them. And then all the mayhem and foolishness started. So I filed all the serial numbers off, I guess, on that, and just kind of retweaked it. And it looks nothing like the fan fiction that it started off as. But because of course she's not in a band, she's a designer, lingerie designer. But it was a lot of fun doing that and taking that idea and actually seeing it progress into the book that it became. So then once that happened, I just kind of never looked back. So
that's so great. Yay, Georgia romance writers
yeah.
for being so welcoming and wonderful, because they are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So did you go to conferences and all that sort of thing before you started submitting to editors and agents, or?
I did. There were a couple of authors who were writing for the small press that I submitted that book to, because it was an interracial romance with a Black heroine. So there weren't. This was before Arabesque or before any of the ethnic specific lines were created when I was sending this out. So the one press that I knew that was publishing those kind of stories was Genesis Press. So that's actually who I ended up submitting it to. Let's see. So I joined GRW 97. I finished the book in end of 98. I got the contract in 99, and I was published in 2000. So that's basically
outstanding.
First book. Yeah. And I've been behind ever since. So, I didn't have a stake that I sold my first book, and then it's like I don't have anything else except these bits and pieces. So there was nothing else that was completed that I could sell. So I've been behind deadlines ever since for 20 years. Oh my goodness. You would think I'd learned by now, but no.
Well, when I first joined RWA and joined Washington Romance Writers, because I'm in the DC area, that was one of the things they kept harping on is keep writing, keep writing, keep writing. Because the first thing they're going to say to you when they buy your book is, what else do you have?
Yes.
and like you, I was like, well, I actually had other books. I had other things. But my editor said, okay, but those are paranormals. I don't want paranormals. I just want suspense. Yeah. What else you got? And I'm going, so just write real fast. Propose something and hope it flies.
That was it. I mean, because like you, I had, because I had read all this science fiction and fantasy. Yeah. So of course I was working on a fantasy story or, something like that, magic and psychics and witches and all of that. And they were like, no, I need another contemporary. So I was like, I know that paranormal is going to be a thing, so I want to try to pitch this. And my agent at the time was like, yeah, this isn't going to sell. I need you to write women's fiction. I'm like, I don't know anything about women's fiction. I'm 25. What do I know? I really want to do these werewolves and these psychics and stuff. And so I was like, well, maybe we should part ways. And I'll just keep on plugging away on these other things. So I tried to sell my psychic family to an editor who shall not be named. I don't think she's in the business anymore, but
a lot of them aren't.
When RWA was in Atlanta, when was that? Probably 2002, 3, somewhere in there. Uh-huh. I pitched it to a couple of editors. One of the editors, she was Black. She told me that Black people will not read this book because it's satanic. And I'm like, it's psychics. Everybody's got an aunt or a grandma in their family who has a sight, who reads the tea leaves, who knows what the shoes and the trees mean, all of that kind of stuff. So
yeah, absolutely.
Everybody's got that folklore. So saying that, nobody's going to read it because they'll think it's of the devil. So it took a while to, I guess, work through that stigma. Lucky I found another small press who was interested in that story. And Dream of Shadows came out in 2000. Lordy, I can't remember. You would think that I would be up to date on my history, but I can't remember when that was. 2006, I think that was. But before that, it was Parker Publishing. And before that, they put out an anthology called Vegas Bites, and they were good friends of mine. So they called us like, we're thinking about writing Black werewolves in Vegas. I'm like, I'm in. She's like, but you haven't heard anything. I was like, I'm in. She's like, L.A. Banks is going to write the lead story. Then I'm definitely in.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you had me at werewolves in Vegas, so I was like, I'm there. So it was a lot of fun writing in that shared world story that they came up with. So that was a lot of fun, but I still wanted to do, like a really involved paranormal world. Contemporaries were, I enjoyed writing the contemporaries, but I was really, I was watching Underworld. I was, anything that had vampires in it, the Carpathians by
Yeah.
Christine Feehan, all of those. I was reading that was pretty much what I was reading, as well as fantasy. So I just really wanted to try my hand at it.
Yeah.
And how Shadowblade came about was I had been long fascinated with Egyptian mythology. I mean, since I was a kid, watching The Mummy, the Isis Shazam Power Hour.
Oh yeah.
I'm
Oh
going
wow.
way back.
There's a
lot of people are like, "What is that?"
I haven't thought about that in forever. That's great.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, so Almighty Isis and how she would change, and she had the necklace and the all of that. So it was just, I wanted to write some stories like that. So Kira just kind of naturally evolved out of that, you know, that and being a relic hunter and just all of those kind of stories and adventure stories, but set in a paranormal world, and just kind of putting a spin on her.
It's a little bit Lara Croft. It's a little bit Indiana Jones. It's a little bit, Jack McDevitt. There's the architectural, archaeological bit,
Right.
and there's history because your vampire is very old.
Yes.
And I don't want to give away much of the story, but she gets involved through various and sundry ways. She's a relic hunter.
Yes.
And she proves provenance of things for several folks that she works with. And then she meets her match.
Yes, Kafar. He was, okay, I can say who he was inspired by. You remember Andromeda, the TV show?
Yeah.
You remember Tyr? What was his name?
Oh, Fan Me Now.
His name with the braids. Yes, Keith Hamilton? No, yes. No, Keith Hamilton Cobb.
I'll have to look him up.
See, somebody's going to kick my ass saying that, of course you know who he is. But anyway, Tyr Anastasi on Andromeda was the inspiration for Kafar in the Shadowblade books. So I'm like, I need to give this guy a great backstory. So I'm like, well, I'm talking about Egypt, so why don't I make him have been around during that time? But why is he around that long? It's like, oh, well, okay, so he's 4,000 years old. He's a Nubian. That's why he's black and he's got the dreadlocks. And he's got to save a life for every life he took in trying to avenge his family's death at the hand of these marauders. So I'm like, bingo. Bingo. So, okay, well, that's a lot of angst that he's got to deal with there. So, okay, if that's how you want me to write you, then that's how I'm going to write you.
Such a lovely inspiration. I'm so glad you said his name, though, because, his name is one where I know how I pronounce it when I read it, but I'm glad to hear you, the creator, pronounce it.
And I'm probably going to pronounce it some other way, but in my head, that's the way he told me it should be pronounced. So I'm like, okay, dude, I gotcha.
We got it. Now, right now, there are 3 books in that series or 4?
There are 3 books in that series. I am planning another 3-book arc. And then my story that I put in Christmas at Canaan Castle is kind of Shadow Chasers adjacent. So, yes. And Kira and Kafar do make an appearance in that story, which I really did love, and I want to expand on that eventually. But yeah, I'd like to write little Shadow Chaser adjacent books, just kind of set in that world, but featuring other characters. Because I've populated it with quite a few different, a motley assortment of creatures.
But some fascinating characters with interesting quirks and little hinted at stories of their own that I'm really glad that you're going to do another trilogy and that you're going to do some spinoffs because because you've created some really cool three-dimensional, interesting characters there. And for those of you who don't know, Seressia and I were both in an anthology called Christmas at Canham Castle, which is set on a castle in the Welsh marches of England at Christmas time. And there's a historical and a paranormal, 3 or 4 paranormals, I can't remember.
I think so.
2 straight contemporaries, and one of the paranormals is a male romance. So then we did Trick or Treat at Canham Castle, which Seressia was on a deadline, so she didn't join us for. But we're doing a New Year's one this year, and she'll be back. So
yes,
and Kira Kafar adjacent story.
Yes.
Well, that's now you also did the Jackals series.
Yes.
Which really goes and plays back into that mythology background that you spoke of, that you really love. And because there's the Isis and there's the Jackals. And so tell us how that came about, because those are, first of all, also they're smoking hot.
Yeah, Nocturne Bites. They asked me if I had any kind of story ideas for them for that. And I'm like, well, how about you've already got plenty of vampires. What about and there are plenty of wolves out there. How about jackal shifters? How about we do that? And let's call them Sons of Anubis, like they're a motorcycle gang, but they're actually descendants of Anubis, and they serve Anubis, and they basically make sure that the dead stay dead and don't try to come back. So I'm like, okay, that kind of, they're like sold. And it's like, and then of course their love interest is going to be these daughters of Isis. So they're priestesses, but there's been this big misunderstanding several thousand years ago where they got betrayed, and so now they're enemies, and then they have to try to figure out, why they're enemies and how to mend that. So it's like one of the granddaughters of one of the Isis priestess who was there at the time gets kidnapped by the leader of the jackal shifters, who just happens to be the second in command of the male jackal who got betrayed back then. He kidnaps him because Isis wishes, he thinks, are poisoning his men and killing off the jackals, and they're few in number. So he kidnaps her to save his men, and mayhem and foolishness and sexy times ensue. So it was a lot of fun writing that. But more fun than writing the sexy times and stuff was writing their mythology and how the betrayal happened and what their cause is and what their charge is, and just kind of, how he is the embodiment of Anubis for his people. And so they call him, Anapa or Enput, which is the Egyptian name for Anubis. And so I like that. And then his female counterpart would be his mate. And so they start calling her that. And it's just getting into that mythology and delving into that. I just had so much fun just writing and researching that, and just layering on these little tidbits of information about their society. So I want to write some more in that too.
Well, you've created such as with the Shadow Blade stories, the Shadow Chasers, you've created such a rich world and a rich mythology, and it's wonderful world building on both worlds. But I particularly love the world building on the Jackals, because like you said, you created this mythology, you created this sort of interwoven mythology that has the misunderstanding, like you said, but as they work to solve that, then there's also the mystery of, okay, well, who did do the betraying, and who did do the killing, and who was undermining them both?
Right.
And
so, yeah.
And
which in the third book that kind of comes to a head in the third book in that series. Yeah,
and it's a really great world that you've got so much scope to go further.
I know. Yeah, so I'm like, oh my God, I can write some historicals in this. I can write, how they came to America. Why are they in America? Why are they not still in Egypt? All of that kind of stuff. I really need to, there's so many ideas in so little time, or it feels like it's a little time, but I also have a short attention span. I'm like, oh, look, squirrel. So I really need to get back into those stories. I would love to revisit both of those. I have ideas. I had an idea for at least one more contemporary with a nun, daughter of Isis protagonist. She's actually, because at the end of those three books, one of the jackals is still missing. So they're presuming that he's dead, but he's not dead. And the heroine that I was going to have find him is actually a police detective. And so I kind of had an idea for that story, but then, life.
Yes,
So
yes.
so I was going to have her kind of end up being like she's a long lost descendant of somebody, or
Right.
her family.
Well, and
So
the cool thing about the prequels, if you did prequels, is that you could do prequels on both sides of the house, because until they meet in Hunting the Jackal, you don't resolve the issue
right.
of the curse. So the prequels would all be like, okay, we're dealing with these other things, we're dealing with these other things. And that would be
Yes.
super fun.
I really want to do that. So yeah, I definitely want to dive into how their religion as they see it, how it works for them. Because basically for them it is their faith.
Right.
It's probably never going to get put in the in the inspirational category in a contest, but it is their belief system, and their faith is a very large part of their lives. So I get to, with that, I get to explore a lot of the ancient Egyptian holidays and feast days and stuff like that. So I like to put that in there, and for that series, and also for the Shadowblade series, I pulled a lot of work from the Book of the Dead, a lot of the prayers and traditions and things like that out of that, and out of just some research that I've done. Emory University has here in Atlanta has a great the Michael C. Carlos Museum. They have a whole Egyptian wing. Went there, it was like going to Candyland or heaven. I'm not sure which one. It was a field of reeds. So it was a lot of fun going in there and actually seeing mummies and seeing artifacts and reading up on the history, and talking to the curator of the collection and stuff like that, and just kind of learning about it even more. Peter Lacavoria was there, and he's done excavations and archaeological digs in Egypt. So it was really great to listen to him talk. So it's like,
and there's nothing like a museum shop for books that you can't find anywhere else.
Exactly.
On the subject that you really need.
Exactly. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was like, so it's like I'm writing these stories to kind of support that my habit of Egyptology habit. So yeah, it's a lot of fun, and yeah, I've definitely got to get back into it. Even if I can't do full length books, I'd like to do novellas, just so that I can just go back into the stories. Because you're right, there's a lot of untapped history there that I really need to explore and bring out.
Well, you also took sort of a side trip to a pseudonym, which was Mallery Malone.
Yes.
And you wrote a historical.
I did.
And is it the Viking era, or is it medieval, or?
Yes, it's medieval Viking era. So it's 1016 in Ireland. So it's right after the last big battle between the Vikings and the Irish, when they lost their king. So it's kind of, the Vikings are there, they're not going anywhere. So there's still kind of this animosity, but so she's there with her brother and her friend. They're being mercenaries, so they're swords for hire, basically, because they ran away from home, basically, to escape her being married to some guy that their older brother wanted her to marry for power and favors and stuff, against their father's wishes. But when father died, older brother's like, yeah, now you're going to do what I want to do, and they're like, peace out, we're gone. Right. So they're like, we're going to bounce, we're going to head over to Ireland.
The 11th century version of teenage rebellion, not Disney.
Exactly. So it's like, I don't want to marry that guy that you want me to marry. You're going to put me in prison until I change my mind. I'm not going to change my mind. So, brother's breaking me out. We're going to leave the country. So, yeah.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. So as mercenaries, then they're in Ireland and mayhem ensues. And
yes.
But this is so different from your contemporaries and your shadow chasers and your jackals. And what made you go to Ireland? Do you have ancestry there? Do you have?
It was again one of those little fascinating side trips. When you're reading the historicals, you're reading the fantasies, and then you just like. Then I got on a Viking glum. I just read a whole bunch of Viking books, and then I read some historical fiction of Ireland. Met some people from Ireland. Went into the library at UGA. Discovered this book from 1902 that was a brief history of ancient Ireland, but it was like 500 pages long.
That's like, the professor saying, I could have given you 1,700 pages, but I condensed.
Right, exactly. So it's just how just kind of being open to discovering new things and learning new things, because I always love to learn new stuff. And I can get on we all go on tangents where we go down a rabbit hole. So this was my version of going down a rabbit hole. I went down an Irish history rabbit hole, and I was like, you know what? I think I'd like to write a story about Vikings, but a female Viking warrior set in this time. I think that would be really cool. So the idea at the time, way back when I started that story, was I was going to do a collection of a collection of female warriors, and it was going to start with the Viking heroine. Then I was going to do a female gunslinger in the Old West. Then I was going to do a contemporary cop, and then I was going to do a futuristic bounty hunter. So that was the plan, and all the things, the best laid plans of mice and men and all of that stuff. That never happened, but that story, and wanted to research that story, just stuck with me. And Erica's story and her brother's story just kind of resonated, because it's all about the recurring theme in all my books. I think it's about found family and finding your place. So just writing the story about how her and her brother and their friend were trying to find a place where they could be happy and
where they fit.
And where they fit. So so I just really enjoyed, because that whole story is about her trying to fit and trying to put herself into this, what she thinks people want her to be, and ending up just having to be her version of herself, and having that work and having people accept that's how she is. That's my lovely poodle.
And that's such an important thing for people to see on the page, that it's okay to be you, and it's okay in any era to be who you need to be you. And,
exactly.
And so I'm super glad you wrote it, and I hope someday you'll go back to that gunslinger and that.
Right.
Yes, as you say, so many books, so little time.
Absolutely.
Now, you did write 3 more contemporaries under that pseudonym, though.
I did. The reason that I picked Mallery Malone, because one, it was not an ethnic sounding name. Everybody knew me as Seressia. So Mallery was just this total separate personality. There were no author pictures or anything like that. So I just wanted to, this was at an answer to so many people saying that they couldn't relate to my African American characters. So and then there were people who were saying, well, those books, there's some quality issues, you just can't get into them. So maybe if they try hone their craft a little bit, then maybe people will read them. All of that BS from from back BS. In the so I was like, okay, then I'm going to create this pseudonym, and I'm going to put her out there and see if I can sell some books. So
sure enough,
I was able to sell 2 books to Sam Hain, the historical, and then I did a contemporary erotic romance novella, and then I sold the Billionaire series to St. Martin's. So
there you go.
So and they were well received. So nobody knew that they were me until I decided that I'm tired of living a dual life. So I'll just say, hey, I also wrote these things. So, to prove that I can be a well-rounded writer. Oh, try to say that 3 times fast.
No, thank you. Hard day. I'm not trying that.
No, not gonna
So,
try that.
but knockout, power play, and takedown are
Mhm,
all sort of they're athletic, they're boxing, MMA,
mhm.
uh, but all the heroes are very well off and do these things sort of as an outlet for their, masculine energy or grief or whatever. Um, what led you to sort of do the whole angle of boxing and MMA and all that?
My husband and I watch MMA all the time. We actually just watched the UFC fight night this past weekend. Um, so yeah, so again, I can sit next to my husband and say that I'm watching these guys for research purposes.
Of course you are.
Right, yeah. Um, and then when I had a townhouse in Marietta, our next door neighbor was actually starting to get into MMA. So he was a fighter and he was training, he was doing local fights. So we went to some local fights and I just kind of just started researching them. Not very well because it was mainly focused on, looking at the athleticism that, yeah, and admiring that. Just like,
But we'll
yeah, it
call
would
it
be
that. Yeah.
right. Yes, that would admiring the athleticism of the fighters and uh the boxers were big, the billionaires were big. So I just decided, I'm a Gemini, so I'm gonna I'm gonna throw stuff together and in my brain it works. So I'm gonna just do billionaire MMA fighters. So
Why not?
who are childhood friends out of New Orleans. So I had a lot of fun writing them too and writing their angsty backgrounds. Cause if it ain't got angst, it's not one of my stories, apparently. So yeah.
So that's a kind of a neat segue into what kind of story you write starts with your process. And I know that you're a big planner, like I am, but that doesn't actually necessarily lead to being a plotter versus a pantser. So which are you? Are you more of a plotter? Are you a pantser? Are you a plotter? Are you?
I am so 20 years I've been trying to change this. I am a pantser. And if I could be a plantser, that's kind of where I would like to be. I'd like to, because I start with my synopsis. I do write a synopsis. Usually it ends up being this long behemoth, and then I have to, trim it down so that my editor's eyes won't glaze over. But I tell the story in the synopsis, and then I instantly forget everything but the three, the three plot, the three arc, you know,
Three extra.
three
Yeah.
act. Thank you, Ooh, Lordy, I am having a day. So yeah, that three arc, the three, what you just said. That thing, that's the three things that you do when you write a story. Yeah, I instantly forget my synopsis and then I just start writing. I know what the main turns are, but then after that, it's like anything goes. And the characters end up telling me, like, I know you wanted me to do this, but I really don't feel like doing that. So I'm gonna do this instead. Now you got to write your way out of that. I
Yeah.
try not to listen to them very much, but when I don't, I suffer.
Yeah. Yeah. When you don't want to do what they want.
Great. Then they're like, well, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to sit here and stare at the wall for the next 20 pages. And
Which
so,
is
yeah,
not helpful and not moving the story forward.
not moving the story at all. So I have to feed the creative gods and, do what they say. And that's how the story starts flowing along. So I would like to, because I have all of those things I want to get back to, I'd like to be able to write some stuff, finish on time, if not ahead of time, so that I can do the other things that I want to do. It's like the things I'm contracted for, the things that I want to put out myself. Um, they seem to be diametrically opposed some days, but yeah, I would just, and then of course I have the day job too. So which actually involves writing. So trying to do all of that, sometimes it's hard. So I figured that if I could try to train myself to be somewhere in the middle between a full-on pantser and a full-on plotter, it would be nice, especially when I have so many friends who are good at plotting. And they've tried to teach me. Poor Farah Rashawn, she's tried to teach me her process a couple of times. and the eyes roll in the back of my head. I glaze over. I'm like, I've got these Post-its, and I know I'm supposed to do something with them with the whiteboard that you said, Farah, and I drew the lines for the 3 acts, and I've got these Post-its, and I know I should color code them for the hero and the heroine, and then the action and the.
Oh Lord, I couldn't do that.
Yeah, and I'm like, I know that if I could take the synopsis and I could break it into an outline, then I could break that into chapters, I could probably, whip this bitch into shape. But it, I just, end up pantsing it, and next thing I know, I need to take 2 weeks to go hide in a hotel and finish a book, which is what I did with the one that's coming out in December.
But sometimes, especially when you have a day job like you do, you have to have that time where you can't peripherally see the rest of the family doing stuff, or you can't get up to go get a drink of water or go to the bathroom and see that you got a load of laundry to go from one machine to the next. And you have to get away to some place like a retreat or a hotel room. I've done that before when I was on deadline. I'm like, gotta go.
Yeah.
Because if I'm here, because I'm an extrovert, I'm going to talk to the other people that are in the house with me. And I feel a responsibility because a couple of them are, like
little ones,
not grown. Let's put it that. Well, they're much taller than me now, but they're still not grown. So, so yeah, that's hard when you are more of a pantser, and even when you know the turning points, sometimes getting those characters to actually hit their marks at the turning point,
right,
and do what they're. And then, of course, as you get towards the end, you have to deal with the fact that they made 3 or 4 left turns that you were not expecting. And you've got to go back and sort of smooth all that out and figure out how to seed it up front when they made a left turn over here.
Right. So yeah, it's, again, trying to whip them into shape and whip the story into shape, and find the words and make sure that all the ends are tied up nicely, and T's are crossed and I's are dotted. Sometimes you're like, oh, well, in that chapter, there are no T's crossed whatsoever. So now I've got to go back in there. Like, yeah. So I would like to be able to write where I am done before deadline, so that I can have time to go back and make sure that story is actually what's in my head actually translated, instead of assuming that, oh, you knew what I meant about that, didn't you, Miss Editor? My poor editor, bless her heart. When I turned that book in, when I turned LoveCon in, I knew what the story was, and I knew where it was going, and I knew everything about it. And then she's like, I don't know what's going on here.
Yeah, my editor is my editor has been known to say, I know you know what's going on page 257. No one else does.
Yeah.
Expand.
Right. Yeah. So that was it. So it's like, I know you know what the rules of this cosplay competition are, but you haven't told anybody what the rules are for this cosplay competition in your story.
That actually brings up it's perfect segue into, you have this fabulous new romantic comedy.
Yes.
And it's called
The LoveCon.
The LoveCon. So tell us about the LoveCon. How'd you get that idea? I kind of know, but I want to tell everyone.
Well, I'm a native Atlantan, so Dragon Con has been a very large part of my geeky life growing up.
Yay, Dragon Con!
So I would go all the time, go with friends, dress up in costumes, love costumes. I have way more corsets than I know what to do with. And also the Renaissance Fair. That's another reason why I have so many corsets.
And probably
so few places to wear them.
And probably why A Promise Kept was huge fun.
Yeah. So, cosplay it's definitely been fun, and looking for drops in the sea of milk. I hate to say it like that, but it was kind of, I go in the early days, I would go in and, you tried to see if there were other people who looked like me who were there. And we were few and far between. It's a lot better now. A lot more blurs are out there, Black nerds, geeks, and all of that. So they're embracing the culture. But there's always pushback on Black people cosplaying characters who are not Black. Which I'm like, these are fictional characters. This is an alien, an actual alien. I think it's okay.
Yeah, totally okay.
Right? On a good day, she's orange. So it's okay.
So quit.
Right? So, I think it's okay for, us to indulge our love. So I wanted to write a story that was it's not biographical because I cannot create a costume to save my life. I can piece together a costume, but I can order a costume with the best of them. But
I'm with you there.
Don't have the time, and there are more talented people out there than I. So I
will pay them
give
for
them
that
my
skill.
money. Exactly. So I just wanted to write a story about a plus size Black chick who was a geek and who loved cosplay and writes, and just loves doing it and loves gaming and just kind of write a love letter to the Black geekdom and geekery out there and all the Black nerds, just to to write a story with us in it, or with someone like her in it. So yeah, and it was just going to be it's just going to be about her and cosplay, and then it's like, you know what, it is, I kind of need to up this. So what if, that question.
Oh yes,
what
my
if,
favorite.
So what if it's not that she's just cosplaying? What if she is in a competition creating cosplays? Every week there's a challenge, they have to do it, and then the grand prize, the finale of the show is creating not only one costume from scratch, but creating 2 costumes from scratch. And it's got to be a couples cosplay or a duo cosplay of iconic duos. And then you got the snarky judge that's like, oh, well, you don't have anybody to be in your duo. And she's like, oh, yes, I do. I have my boyfriend who but Cam is not her boyfriend. Cam is her best friend, and she announces on live TV that he's her boyfriend and he's going to help her design these costumes and win this competition, which is news to him, but it actually is good news to him because he's carried a torch for her for years because they've been friends since high school. He was his mother had passed right before high school, and his father was kind of neglectful. So her family kind of adopted him, and basically they've been best friends and together ever since. So he's kind of felt like he owes them, but all during that time when they were growing up, he just has carried a torch for her, and he's going to use the competition and helping her win the competition as kind of so he can win her heart. So he sees it as a quest and a challenge, and so and figuring out the boss level is convincing her that that they're meant to be together. So it's just been a lot of fun putting in all of those references and gaming and geeking and anime, and of course there's a nod in the story to my Egyptian mythology love, because one of their favorite programs.
Of course, you could not let that opportunity pass.
So one of their favorite programs is this fictional show called Anubis Rising, which is about a private detective who's descended from Anubis and speaks to dead people. So that's how he solves crime. So it's like I just love this story idea.
That. You've got to write that.
Right. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to put this in here so I can park this idea so nobody will steal this idea. So I can say it's Perfect. In this book. And I'm going to write this light crime detective series about this descendant of Anubis that speaks to dead people. So
that's awesome. Well, yeah. The first time I heard you talk about this absolutely fabulous romantic comedy, I was like, I cannot wait for that. So when does it come out?
Oh, yeah, because I write right up to my deadline. It's coming out December 14th. So I'm very, very happy. It's coming out. It's got a cover. We did a cover reveal on it last Monday.
Oh, it's so cute. Do you have a copy of it that you can hold up?
No. Oh, I should have done that. I should have made my background into the book cover. But yeah, just look on my social media. It's all of it's out there. Haven't gotten the arcs yet or anything like that. So we just did the cover reveal, and it's so cute. It's what the story is, because Cameron Cam is I describe him as Thor's sexier older brother. So on the cover, he's holding Thor's hammer, which is just, I just love it. So it's just a cute cover that really sums up what the story is about. You know what it is when you're seeing it. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I saw when I saw the cover reveal, I was so tickled because, first of all, you had described the story, and I just thought, oh my gosh, I've got to pre-order that. But the pre-order link went up yet, and then I was like, oh my gosh, as soon as I can pre-order that, I'm pre-order it. And then I saw the cover reveal, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's so cute.
No, it's so cute, and and it's like, so it is such a there. It's one of the funnier books that I've written. I would not have called myself a comedic writer. I probably still won't call myself that, but there is tons of snark, and there's tons of fun, tons of gummy worms, and just funny little scenes. It was just such a pleasure to write these guys, and actually it's just a pleasure to write a book and and finish a book, because last year was a little hard. So I everybody went through things.
Yeah.
So it was rough trying to escape into the world. So into that book world. So it was actually escape. It was actually kind of therapeutic in a way,
Oh, I'm
writing
sure.
them, and and having her go through this competition, and just kind of talk about some of the realities of being a plus size cosplayer, being a Black cosplayer, being a female cosplayer. All of that is kind of in there, and how the pressures that can bring on somebody, and how she's
Right.
made it that far, on sheer determination and skill, and how her
Right.
support network is helping her through that. So not only is it about her journey of support and about their relationship growing and developing and deepening. Yeah, so and their friends are great. Yeah, I just enjoyed
Oh,
writing about them.
I can't wait. It's called The Love Con, and I cannot wait to read it. And when we drop this, we'll make sure we put it down in the cover reveal down in the comments for when anybody wants to check it out. But it is such a cute concept, and I'm not a huge reality TV show person, but I love Project Runway.
Mhm.
So when you started talking about this, I'm like, oh man, it's like Dragon Con meets Project Runway. This is gonna be great.
That is pretty much it. Yeah.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited for that book. I can't even tell you now. Not that I don't love the jackals and the everything else, but that just sounds like exactly what we need right now, is just kind of this wonderful parfait.
And it's fun. Yeah. Thanks.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to do as we sort of wrap up here is ask you, now that you've got that turned in and it's headed for production, everything, what are you going to work on next?
The next,
Obviously, Kingdom Castle is coming.
yes. So I've got the New Year's story that it's percolating, and I'm getting ready to put that down, and then my next book, following the Love Con, will be called Game On, which is still in that Black geekdom nerdery phase. So it's about Black girl gamers. So
Excellent.
so it's about her. She's taking, because there's social justice in it as well, but in a funny way. So it is about female gamers and the owner of a software company who gets accused of misogyny against female characters in his games, and he's like, doesn't know what she's talking about, what is misogynoir, and he has to look it up to figure out what that is, and then he once he finds out what it is, he looks at his games and is like, God damn it. So
Caught.
yes, and so it blows up over the weekend, because the name of his company is Artemis Games, and so she started this hashtag called Artemis Foul, about how about how how they need to have better representation. So of course it starts trending, which gets his notice, and he's trying to handle it. So he goes to a gaming convention incognito to kind of hear her talk, to see if she's just trying to do this for clout, or if she's really trying to do change. And so he ends up being fascinated by her and tries to hire her as his chief diversity officer. She laughs in his face and says, you know, I'm just not going to be paying lip service. And he's like, name your price. She names her price. He's like, okay. And I'll also sponsor your gaming group in a competition. So that's one of the things that she's been wanting to have with sponsorship, but because of you know, all the things she's been championing, those opportunities have been few and far between. So they work together, they're thrown together as she's, you know, navigating online gaming and diversity in gaming and all of that stuff. And, you know,
Oh my gosh, it sounds
so
just as cute.
yeah, so there's going to be a lot of snark because, you know, if I can't do angst, I'm going to do snark. And so there's going to be both of that in there. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And just, yeah, I just love them. Aaron and Samara, that's their names. And I'm just looking forward to writing their story. So
Oh,
it's gonna be fun.
I'm so excited because now I know what's coming next. I can look forward to reading it.
Yeah.
As we wrap up here, then why don't you tell us where we can find you on the web, on social media, all that great stuff.
Okay, my website is seressiaglass.com. So if you can spell my name, you can find me. If you can spell my first name, you can pretty much find me anywhere. There are few and far between people named Seressia out there. So on Twitter at Seressia, Facebook is author Seressia Glass, Instagram Seressia Glass, and then regular Facebook is Seressia. So just do a search for my name. Hopefully all of that will come up. And I'm not on Instagram as much as possible as I probably should be, because Instagram is all about pictures and I don't like taking pictures. That's why I don't have a lot of cosplay pictures of me in my cosplaying outfits from Dragon Con's past. But I'm gonna get better at it because, you know, I'm going to Dragon Con this year and I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to you know, hopefully it will actually happen. I'm pretty fingers crossed that it actually happens this year.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to buying some costumes so that I can.
The vendor hall is just calling our names from 2 years. For 2 years now.
Exactly. So
well, thank you so much for being with us here on ConTinual. So you can find me, Jeanne Adams. You can find Seressia here because she's on a lot of our panels. And thank you so much for being with us. I hope you all will check out Seressia's books because they're awesome. And
thank you.
Have a great evening, everybody.